Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. An interesting Saturday in ACC basketball from coaches looking like we saw the end of their tenure in real time to triangle teams, Lauren, that I think at this point in January, as we're closing out the month, I feel like Duke, NC State, and North Carolina, this is who they are. And you're just going to have to live with it going forward for good and for bad.
Yeah, I mean, I've told people all year long that State can beat anybody on a given night, and they probably can lose to anybody on a given night. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's just true. I mean, they have guys that can score and are capable of scoring and are good players.
Yep.
They're just not super deep. So if one or two things go wrong that absolutely can't go wrong for them, they could lose to anyone. Boston College, I don't care. Name them. They could lose to them. But when they put it all together and play well, they're going to play like they did last night. And I just honestly, I love to see it. Sorry to all you Kevin Keats haters out there. Just saying. You'll have to wait a few more days, I guess, to be mad at him. I mean, I'm not wrong. I'm sorry that you were mad that you guys came back against Virginia Tech and it wasn't enough. And it doesn't matter because you didn't win, which I've heard again.
Yeah.
Oh, are you cool with a double-digit beating of an ACC opponent at home that's traditionally very difficult to play against? Cool.
But I feel like there's a lot of angst in ACC basketball fandom right now. You know, like with State fans, the angst I feel is justified towards Kevin Keats with the inconsistencies and, as we've talked about in the past, as it relates to getting talent to show up at NC State. Okay, so I get all those things, but like what bothered me this past week was the success of the women's basketball team was being used as a way to cut what's going on at Kevin Keats with Kevin Keats at NC State. And it's like you can two things can be true at once. You could be excited about the women's basketball program and success and Westmore, and also understand why those situations are different.
I saw the tweet that you quoted about we should just start calling NC State women's basketball NC State basketball and give the men the gender designation.
Yeah.
If I thought that guy was for real because of gender, and because of the fact that, look, the women's team, it's a top 5 team. They're really, really good.
Yep.
NC State isn't that level of men's program right now. If that was what I thought was the real reason, I'd be like, power to you, man.
No,
cool.
It's not the real reason.
But it's not the real reason. Stop using women as an insult or just to support your agenda if you don't really care that much. Thank you.
Yeah, the level, it's interesting, the level of, Gilio made this point, you know, if the women's game was as invested fandom-wise as the men's game, Westmore, even with the success, would be getting criticized for some of his rotations, right? Especially with a veteran-laden team. It's like he made the examples, like, do you want to talk to Roy Williams about the old Kendall Marshall, Larry Drew stuff from back in the day?
I was going to say, we could spend 5 minutes easily on the fact that you have two level of women's basketball fan, and I know this from having covered it as
well. I know. No, I know you know. Yeah.
You have women's basketball fan that is a fan of the school, likes watching the women play, will come to the big games and enjoy themselves, and just they're generally very positive. They support the team. That's just how their fandom is. Then you have the hardcores, and the hardcores are like hardcore on a level that, I mean, you do see it in men's basketball, but it's just like they know everything about everybody. They know what the coaching strengths and weaknesses are. They know all of that stuff. So those are like the two. It's a weird dichotomy. Like there's not as much middle as you get in the men's game, I feel like.
I mean, sorry for the tangent there, but I do feel like how the week played out with NC State women and what's going on with NC State men kind of meshes into where things are with NC State, where you're right. Beating Virginia is a lot easier when every shot is going in. Like, I know you had an exchange with our friend Caroline Darney, who's a big Virginia fan, and she was lamenting like the stats. She's like,
you even held State off the offensive boards.
Right,
I'm like,
right,
but that's because they're making they were shooting like 61%.
Every shot Like, what are you going to do,
get
right?
offensive rebounds if you're not missing, you know?
They're making every shot. So, yes, a wise man once said, gotta make shots, okay? Sidney Lowe was absolutely true when he said that. Your best players got to be your best players. And when NC State's looking like that, they look good, but we also understand that's also part of who they are, where they're going to go through a stretch within games that can cost them the game, or they're going to go through a stretch that's going to turn the tide like we saw in the first half, where they went on an 11-0 run that completely changed the nature of the game, and they never looked back. So State just kind of is, like, that's what they are. Yeah. And at the base, and my last thought on State, the base for me with State is they play hard every game. They might not be the most talented group. They're not going to win all the games, obviously, but all I can ask is, are you playing hard? Yeah. Are you trying? Are you not quitting? Are you letting these things get to you? The answer to all that stuff is no. This is a team that absolutely, when the game is over, you can honestly say, hey, they left it on the court. As cliche as that sounds.
No, I know.
They left it on the court. And honestly, sometimes in a weird ACC season where we all understand the talent level is down across the board and the ACC is not what it used to be, sometimes that's all I'm asking for base-wise, because you can flip it to North Carolina, right? I think we've seen an interesting turn. I think the Wake Forest game, or this week alone, has caused Hubert Davis to completely pivot in how he talks about this team, or how he might approach this team. And I guess it's one of these, I'm left with no choice but to try this, right? Yeah. Because the vibe that I got from Hubert Davis was that he was talking this team up. He didn't want to break their ego. He didn't want to break their spirit. You know, he talked up Armando Bacot as an ACC Player of the Year. He talked about his other players like Caleb Love or RJ Davis as being the best guards in the ACC, or how, you know, certain players could be great defenders, or Brady Manick can be this, you know, great shooter, or whatever it is. He was talking them up, right? You don't want to break the spirit. And also I think that presented itself in the rotation too, because it's not like he was doing the Roy Williams thing of just putting guys out there and trying various combinations or taking guys off the floor because he wasn't happy with the way they were playing. He was just sticking with them. But the Wake Forest game, I think, was a pivot, because what did we see? We saw lineups that were like, huh? You doing this now? In late January?
I think I tweeted this, like 8 minutes into the game, I think it was, he had played 9 guys. Yes. There were entire games where he didn't play 9 guys this year.
And then after the game, there was an admission of, hey, Wake Forest guys were just better than our guys. And it wasn't, it's no longer, it's an admission that this roster is not as talented as maybe as we wanted people to believe. And I'm guilty of that. I'm not trying to act like I didn't think this team wasn't talented enough. I think it's an admission now that, you know what, this team just isn't it, and you're going to have to overcome that, which gets back to NC State, right? NC State's not the most talented roster in the ACC, but they fight. They try. This team continues to get insular. They continue to kind of like get down in the moment, and you can't do that if you can't out-talent the other team.
When there's a talent discussion, especially when a coach brings it up, it often devolves into a silly discussion that has very little to do with what the coach actually means.
True.
I took that in a few ways, actually, from Hubert. One of the ways I took it was like, I don't think, because the thing is, people are going to look at North Carolina's roster, and what they'll do is they'll count the 5 stars, right? They'll count the 5-star recruits
McDonald's
and be like,
All-Americans.
Right, exactly. And they'll just be like, well, that's not true. Look at, this guy wasn't a McDonald's All-American and this guy was, or whatever else.
Yeah.
It's really not the point. And what I took from that is, I think what Hubert actually meant, not far be it for me to say that, but he's not talking about star ratings. He's talking about what he's getting from all of these guys right now. And really for the better part of the last year or so, right? Like, what he's getting from these guys right now, is it the peak of their capabilities? Probably not. But at the same time, when they played that basketball game last night, that's what he was that's how I took that, actually, was like, last night, those guys for Wake Forest were way better than anybody we had on the court.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's saying, like, we don't have any 5 stars. We have, like, a bunch of 1-star recruits. I didn't take it that way. I think what he's saying is what he is getting from these guys right now is not as good as what the other teams are getting out of their guys. And I I think a lot of people would view what Hubert said as almost like a passing of the buck, but I don't actually necessarily think that. I mean, he's been their coach this whole time.
No.
I think what he's saying is, for whatever reason, whether it's the guys, whether it's him, whatever it is, what they are getting out of these players right now is not nearly the same as what other teams are getting out of their players.
We talked to Hubert Davis on Friday. Gilio and I talked to him on Friday. And, I followed up what happened on Wednesday, or what he said Tuesday against Miami, in that there's nobody in the room stepping up, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm with you. It's not a passing of the buck. I'm going to believe that the coaching staff is trying to prepare these guys the best way they can.
Yeah.
At some point, the players do have to take some responsibility as to what they want this season to be or how they want to go about this. And I know Gilio likes to point this out too. We actually had this conversation on Thursday, and he likes to relay a conversation he had with NC State coach Kevin Keatts, who I think is it was foreshadowing what I think Duke and North Carolina were about to face, whether they realized it or not. And a reason why Roy Williams is no longer coaching. Trying to find what motivates these guys. And I'm not bringing this up in a classic, like, the previous generation just simply cared more. That's not what I'm getting at.
It's not that simple. There's a lot of factors at play here, yeah.
This is a very layered, nuanced conversation about what motivates players today and the difficulty of coaches trying to pinpoint those things to maximize the results on the court. Okay. It's no different than parenting sometimes, Like,
you just try things until it works.
I struggle on a daily basis to find what motivates my 13-year-old to get good grades and things like that, right? And he's in a different generation than I grew up. What worked with me to get me to do something doesn't necessarily work with kids today. And there's a layered conversation about that. So Keatts struggles with this. And you're seeing having not Hall of Fame coaches at various places struggle with this as well. And that's why it's not necessarily a giving Hubert Davis a pass, because I don't think that Hubert Davis has done himself any favors in the way that he's talked about this team.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before we even started recording. Yeah. It's like, I know Greg Barnes got a hard time from Inside Carolina for what he said about the messaging problem for UNC, but I mean,
he's not wrong.
The thing is, when you're a first-year head coach and you're taking over from somebody, you don't have to spell out everything you want to do, but I think it is important, especially during your first year, to sort of specify what maybe you do differently and why. I mean, I think we got a lot of that from Roy his first few years at Carolina, especially. Like, these are the things I do that are like Dean. These are the things that I do that are not. And I just feel like we don't know. I mean, he kind of said in the press conference, like, he wants to keep things the way they are. Hubert Davis said that about, like, what Roy has built, blah, 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 but we'll modernize some things. We'll tweak here and there, but we don't really know what that is or what that means or what the philosophy is. It's just, we're sort of left to, and it's fine that we're reading between the lines, it's whatever, but we're left to sort of read between the lines. I think in some ways, I think it would be easier if we just knew, like, okay, well, Hubert believes in X in terms of, but I think what we're seeing right now is, and I get it because we've been there as parents too, like, is sort of a, hey, I'm learning on the job here too. The more I think about it, the more I kind of think that's what it is. He hasn't coached as a head coach long enough to know what his philosophy even would be.
Yeah, so, and the stakes of coaching JV are different than the stakes that we're seeing now, obviously.
Yeah. It just is, there's puzzling things that happen, right? Yep. Like, whether it's Carolina, and this part is whatever, but I mean, they were great on the offensive glass forever. Now they're not anymore. Which is fine because they do other things differently, but whatever. Roy would play 9-10 guys in the non-conference routinely, sometimes 11 or 12, and Hubert was not that way. And so, when we see those things happen, but we don't necessarily know why or what goes into it, we're just kind of left to guess. And I think that can be troublesome when you hit kind of a rough patch as they've done right now. But
yeah, and this gets to all situations and finding out once you get there how it might not go the way you think it goes. And we'll close on this. You see this at Louisville, right? Chris Mack arrived there as a foregone conclusion, right? He was at Xavier, had success at Xavier. When Rick Pitino was shown the door, it was really a matter of when, not if, Chris Mack was going to take that job, and it all worked itself out, right? But Chris Mack is like a lot of coaches that we see, most recently Archie Miller at Indiana, where
seemed like a slam dunk hire.
On paper, this makes total sense. Look at the success that they had at place X, and now they're elevating it. They're just going to do what they do, and they're going to take the... No, because there are other aspects of the job that some coaches might not be suited for. And I know Mark Ennis, who does radio at in Louisville, made this point on Twitter where he's like, look, he doesn't have the temperament to be the number one thing in a town, day in, day out. And for Louisville basketball is the thing. They treat Louisville basketball like a pro sport in that town. And if you don't have the temperament to handle that, it's going to get away from you real quick. Just like we saw with Archie Miller at Indiana. You can do all the things that you were doing at Dayton and be a darling because you've gotten this team to overachieve while you've been mostly under the radar nationally. But once you get to the big boy area and it's an everyday thing, your temperament is just not suited for that. And that fit clearly is not working out at Louisville. Be curious to see, because he's not coming back. Like when you have a player asked about whether or not the coach's messages are getting through, and his response is, I can't comment on that right now. It's a wrap. It's a wrap for Chris Mack at Louisville. And he's just another in a long line of examples where you think this is an easy plug and play situation. It ain't. And they're going to have to go back to the drawing board after Chris Mack.
Yeah, I'm honestly pretty shocked by it still, because I thought he was even more of a no-brainer than Archie, to be honest. I mean, Xavier is a really good program year in and year out. That's not to say that Dayton isn't, but I think they play in a league that's better than the league Dayton plays in. And so I really thought it would be fine. It clearly is not fine. Sometimes you can be a good coach in a good program and you just don't fit well together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Duke won.
I was going to say, we're going to get out of here without talking about Duke, aren't we? Which is whatever. I mean,
I think that, honestly,
it's not good.
I think Duke's win over Syracuse is more about where Syracuse is under Jim Boeheim in that zone than it is about Duke. I mean, they methodically picked apart the zone. It allowed, the Canes broadcast was so hype about the fact that Coach K, who is a Carolina Hurricanes fan, he's like, yeah, we had a lot of hockey assists tonight. But it's true. I mean, the way they were working the ball against that zone was beautiful. I mean, it was fun to watch from that perspective. Yes. But it was also pretty brutal and more of an indication of where Syracuse is under Jim Boeheim than anything else. And his old stubborn butt probably might not go anywhere, but it's gotten pretty bad for the Orange.
Yeah, it's just not. I don't even know. And I felt so bad for poor Julie Boeheim getting interviewed when they're down 20.
Down 20 points. And let's talk about how great. She's like, I've never been here before. They're getting run. Yeah, it was.
I can't believe she'd never been there. I was surprised. I mean, yes and no. I know media members that have covered games in all kinds of places that don't want to cover games there. I understand.
Yeah.
I think it's super cool. But no offense, Duke. And I checked the schedule just to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why y'all are doing what you're doing, kind of, with this no eating and drinking thing. Again, kind of. And I feel like they've started a bad trend here because then Virginia copied them and said you can't eat or drink at games now. Yeah. And I'm like, no, y'all, Duke is only doing this because they're not going to stop fan attendance during K's last season.
Yeah.
Stop copying them. Don't copy them. This is stupid. You can't have people at a game for X amount of hours and not be able to eat and drink, especially at that arena. I tried it once. I cannot do that. So I can't. I physically cannot. Can you imagine doing a Carolina Duke game? Thank God it's in March, and I think Omicron will probably be on its way out by then.
Hopefully.
I cannot cover a UNC Duke game without water. I might die.
I went to the state Duke game with that no beverage because even for the media, when I left, I was so thirsty.
I went the Saturday before. I got in my car. All I had in there was an old Coke Zero. I still pounded it. I got where I was going. I had 3 huge glasses of water. I was like, this is awesome. Untenable for me. It's just not. It can't work, y'all. Stop it. Stop with this. Right. Stop it.
Let's go wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. A reminder, the Panic Room, and this is my fault. I should have done this years ago. The Panic Room is available as a podcast
I know. I never thought of it either.
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. It was one of those things I meant to do a while back, but then I just got busy with other things and I never thought about it. It's like one extra step. It really is not that
Of course.
I
don't know. I just didn't think about it.
all I gotta do is strip the audio. It's whatever.
Right. When you were like, oh, we're doing this podcast now, I was like, oh, I have no idea why I didn't think of that earlier.
So just look for the ACC Panic Room wherever you get your podcast. We are there. Anyway, that's gonna wrap it up. We will see you all later in the week. At some point, I'll get out of this damn place. At some point.
Good luck.
Yeah, I'm waiting for 2022 to officially start for me. I'm waiting. I'll get this year started in February, I think. Anyway, we'll see y'all later in the week.